So what's Guild Wars 2? Guild Wars 2 is an MMORPG developed by ArenaNet in 2012. Since then, we'll see it's now 5 years into its life. It's had 2 expansions and 3 seasons of Living World. There's currently a 4th on the way, but we'll see how that progresses. It's a free-to-play game. It was originally buy-to-play, and it still technically is free-to-play, but the entire base game of Core Tyria is entirely free, and there are no restrictions on that at all. Of course, if you buy the game, you get login rewards and everything else, and that's quite nice. The expansions themselves are reasonably priced, around about £25 to £30 here in the UK. They are generally smaller than other MMO expansions. However, with Living World, which is basically mini expansions in between the 2-year cadence for an expansion, it definitely more than makes up for that shortfall. The expansions themselves added content such as masteries and mounts, and like I said, Season 4 is about to start, and the Living World also adds more story, more masteries and everything else. The game itself caters mainly to casuals, but does have content for hardcore players with raids and also PvP and World vs World. It also has the most quality of life features of any MMO I've ever played, and I've played a lot. The base game's got 8 classes, but if you own both expansions, you gain access to the Revenant and 18 Elite Specializations. Elite Specializations are essentially subclasses for your main profession. For example, as a Guardian, I can spec to be either a Firebrand, which was added in Path of Fire, or I could be a Dragon Hunter, as I also own Heart of Thorns. You cannot mix and match those two in the same, so you cannot be a Firebrand and a Dragon Hunter. You're one or the other. This goes for every of the other classes. So there are 3 heavy, that's the Warrior, the Guardian and the Revenant, of course if you own Heart of Thorns. There are 3 medium, which is a Thief, Engineer and Ranger, and then 3 light, which is the Mesmer, Elementalist and Necromancer. Every class plays and feels substantially different from the others, each having their own distinct feel and theme. The Guardian, for example, is your standard Paladin, whereas your Necromancer is, of course, your standard Necromancer. The Thief is your Rogue, etc, etc. The professions themselves also differ from other MMOs, as ArenaNet like to almost reinvent the wheel when it comes to features in their game, and the professions are no different. So Guild Wars could be classed as an action MMO. With a recent update, I say recent, it was shortly before Heart of Thorns, the action cam was added, and this drastically changes how you can play the game. So in your standard MMO, you would generally have your hotbar at the bottom, and then your mouse is free all of the time. You have like your ground targeted skills, and then you can see all of that. With Action Cam, you can bind the camera to your mouse and move that, and left click to attack, and everything else like you would find in, say, Terra. On the surface, the combat seems somewhat limited, with all of the skills being bound to weapons. You do get an extra lot of utility and healing skills. Every class is self-sufficient, and has their own healing skill. There's no hard trinity, though it now has a soft trinity. You can play support, or more of a tank, or straight DPS. Utility skills and the healing skills can be changed, regardless of what class you're on. However, the weapon skills cannot be changed, but you do have access to 2 lots of weapons, so essentially 10 skills. Unless, of course, you play as the Elementalist, who has 4 class-specific attunements, which they can flip between, which is Fire, Earth, Air and Water, and they all give different skills on the single weapon that they have. Due to this limitation of all the skills on the weapons, which, by the way, if you play any other MMOs, and you would realise that there's only an optimal amount of skills that you would use anyway, which probably wasn't even 5, you'd hammer maybe 3 tops, and they were all macroed anyway, so there's that. But because of the way that Guild Wars is built, you can have a lot of build diversity and play almost the same any way you want. And this is great. However, most people do still use cookie cutter meta builds, but there are websites you can use to help build your character. The combat itself is all about synergy and the proper use of combos, blasting fire fields for might, or perhaps you want to blast a water field for some healing. There are other things that you can do, like blinding your opponents or gaining stealth, leap finishers, blasts are one of them, etc. The projectiles, you could turn your normal arrows into fire projectiles, or perhaps ones that can heal you. It all depends on how you play and how smart you play. Mastering the fluidity of Guild Wars 2's combat is both a challenge and very rewarding. Of course, you could just hammer your one key and demand loot, as what everybody else seems to think it's all about. So at its core, it's an MMORPG, and that means it's a social game. However, Arena take that one step further. There's no fighting over resource nodes or mobs, which is what you would normally find in other games. Most notably like World of Warcraft or EverQuest or anything else like that. So long as you deal enough damage, you get the loot, and all of the resource nodes are phased to you, your character, which is very nice. It means you can follow other people's routes, and you won't ever have to worry about not being optimal or spending optimal amount of time. And remember I said about quality of life? Well, you can even unlock auto-looting and AoE loot through the Mastery system. Mastery systems were added with the expansions, so you will need to grab some of those. Though I think you can still have the Quarteria Masteries even if you don't own the expansions. In PvE, most people are farming meta event maps. The world is mostly dynamic through events and event chains. Some maps are even entirely dedicated to these event chains themselves, and that's mostly what you'll be farming if you play PvP. If not, you can play the dungeons, which most people don't do anymore because they weren't very good. And in order to remedy this, the devs added the Fractals of the Mist, commonly known as the Fractals. This is a scaling tiered set of mini dungeons that can be completed very quickly. If you're very good, you can complete some of them in 5 minutes or even less, and they scale in difficulty, and obviously the loot itself scales on top of that. However, if that's not quite your bag and you prefer like the larger scale combat, Heart of Thorns did add raids. Raids are also extremely difficult, and you've got to know what you're doing, because you can't be carried in those. However, with the challenging group content, you can get legendary items. There's a back piece for the Fractals, and there's some legendary armor that you can gain from the raids. However, if PvE is not your bag, there is 2 modes for PvP. First one being structured PvP, or SPVP, which is what it's known, has leagues and automated tournaments. These are generally for teams of around 5 players. That can be changed with custom arenas and other things, but it's generally 5-player teams. The leagues allow you to unlock legendary armor and also a back piece, and the automated tournaments you can also use to progress your just general skill. You can still get PvE rewards through its own special reward tracks. These basically every time you win a match or you play a game, it counts up, adds it to a pool, and then you get your rewards, and you can specify which ones they are. These can take quite a while to get through, however it still allows you to get all the stuff that you might not want to farm yourself in PvE. However, if the small scale stuff is not to your fancy, you can participate in World versus World versus World. This game type pits 3 servers against each other to siege other keeps across 4 different maps. So basically, your server will be facing off against 2 others, and it's more or less a free-for-all. And you'll run around and you'll take supply camps and towers from your enemy, and you'll tick up points. There's a league system as well, so it's very competitive. Large amounts of players all fighting at once. You have squads of guys of maybe like 40 people in your group facing off against, you know, maybe 2 other squads of 40 on the other servers. Very fun. Very rewarding if you get that right. This is unfortunately the most neglected game type, but it's still going strong. And yeah, I highly recommend World vs. World. You can get your own legendary armor and a back piece from that too, so there you go. With that, I should probably go over the expansions Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire added their own maps and player progression through masteries. These are more like side grades to your character, well, to your account, as they're only unlocked one time. They can range from gliding and bouncing mushrooms in Heart of Thorns, as well as a bunch of other things, to a variety of mounts that were added in Path of Fire. Of course, if you see somebody riding around on a raptor or a griffin, you'll need Path of Fire for that. Or if you wanted to just glide without, you know, the use of anything, then of course you'll need Heart of Thorns. Some of the content is locked behind those two, and some of it may even be hidden behind the Living World seasons. So keep that in mind when you are trying to play that specific content if you don't already have it unlocked. It should also be noted that if you play the Living World season as it comes out, each episode, if you log in just once, all you have to do is log in, you will unlock that to your account forever for free. However, if you miss it, you will have to pay gems, which is the premium currency, to be able to play that content. On that note of gems, the game does have a premium store, but it's not as heinous as other MMOs. It is small and it doesn't sell any overpowered or cheaty items. There are a couple of things on there that have invoked the ire of the community over the years. For example, unbreakable gathering tools that give you extra currency on top. But aside from that, there's nothing else. There's boosters anywhere that boosters could be giving a player an edge. For example, in PvP, having like 5% extra attack, they're not allowed. They get taken off of your character, so they get wasted. Something to bear in mind. The currency used in the gem store, of course, is gems. However, if you don't have the cash, or you have a lot of time, you're time rich and money poor, as they say, you can convert your gold into gems to buy stuff on the store, and vice versa. So if you're time poor but money rich, then you can just, you know, whack out the old credit card and turn that into in-game gold, which, you know, if that's the way you want to play, then that's fine. And yeah, that's about it for just this general overview for Guild Wars 2. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, sharing with your friends or anyone interested in Guild Wars 2, and subscribing to my channel if that takes your fancy. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!